Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. Week 15 fantasy football is about to kick off. Of course, that means it's the fantasy football semifinals in most leagues out there. We got to be paying attention to those matchups. So like we do every single week on this video, let's break down some advanced matchups here. Wide receiver quarterback matchups for you for week 15 fantasy football. I'll give you 2 upgrades, 2 downgrades on the video today. Let's start with those upgrades. And hey, for what it's worth, the Cleveland Browns passing game, okay, yes, it's been a disappointment this season, but Jarvis Landry has been surging down the stretch. If you look at it, over the last 5 weeks, he's the number 3 fantasy wide receiver. I know I don't really believe it either, but every time I look, there he is, number 3. Great connection with Baker Mayfield. Better yet, look at the matchup this week. Everybody is throwing on the Arizona Cardinals this season, and yes, he will be lined up across from Peterson. But not Patrick Peterson. See what I did there? It's going to be Kevin Peterson out of the slot for Jarvis Landry for a good chunk of this game. That is a great matchup for Jarvis. Kevin Peterson out of the slot is allowing 16.1 yards per catch for a slot for any corner. That is, wow, that is a big-time number, but especially for the slot corners. Typically, we see lower yards per catch numbers for slot corners because they're covering receivers in the short and intermediate areas of the field. That's a big-time number there. I expect Jarvis to keep rolling this week. Love him. He's a fringe wide receiver 1 play for me this week in that matchup. We're also upgrading Terry McLaurin, F1, not Scary Terry, against the Philadelphia Eagles. Hey, we know the Eagles, they cannot defend speed in their secondary. They can do well if you don't have speedy guys, but we saw last week a speedy guy ran all over them. Darius Slayton with those 2 touchdowns. Even with Eli Manning throwing him the ball, he was a primetime play for fantasy purposes. Same scenario here. Are we that inspired by Dwayne Haskins? No, not necessarily. But Terry McLaurin and his 4-3 wheels should have no problem blowing the top off of that Eagles defense. I like him to get deep for 1. And hey, he's a fringe wide receiver 2 play this week in that matchup. Of course, for the good, there's always the bad. So let's take a look at 2 bad matchups this week. And we're going to start with Stephon Diggs. Now, Adam Thielen should be back, but I still view Diggs as the clear number 1 guy for the Minnesota Vikings down the stretch here. Of course, being the number 1 guy does mean you get star treatment, so expect a shadow here from Casey Hayward. Casey Hayward has been awesome this season, as he's been in recent seasons. One of the best shadow corners over the last several seasons here for us. And when you look at what he's done this season, he's only seeing 3.2 targets per game thrown into his coverage. Now, if you have Stephon Diggs, does this mean you bench Stephon Diggs? No! Don't do that to yourself because, hey, good receivers can still perform well even in bad matchups. So don't go that far. That being said, I am going to downgrade my expectations. I have him as a mid-range wide receiver 2. Actually comes in at 16 in my wide receiver rankings. Still a fantasy starter, but obviously a downgrade this week. All right, well, let's round this out with Tyler Boyd. And hey, Andy Dalton coming back. Who would have thought this would be a good thing? But it certainly is a good thing, really, overall for Tyler Boyd's fantasy outlook. That being said, facing the New England Patriots is never a good thing for a fantasy outlook. Now, Tyler Boyd won't be shadowed by Stephon Gilmore. I know a lot of people look to the matchup and just immediately assume that Gilmore is going to be on him. I actually expect Jonathan Jones to be on him because Boyd is the primary slot receiver, and that's where Jones tends to cover. You might think, okay, well, maybe that's a little bit better than having Gilmore on him. I disagree. Jones this season has been arguably the best Patriots corner, even though he's not a household name. He's doing a great job against opposing receivers. It's a downgrade for Tyler Boyd. He's a very risky start this week. I have him on the edge of wide receiver 3s. Hey, if you have to use him, but I really don't like using him this week. I'd rather keep him on the bench. Of course, where did I get all this information? You know where I got it, at PFF. And over there, we have our wide receiver cornerback matchup chart, which will break down all of these matchups, plus every other starting matchup in the league for this week. And every week during the season, we update it to give you the most current information possible throughout the week as well. And in addition to that, hey, projections, rankings, football data. The Heisman Trophy is about to happen. There's so much going on at PFF right now, so go check us out, pff.com.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.